much. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Carteadevineri this Friday. Thank you very much for making time for us at this end of the week. We have a really intriguing and timely book to discuss this evening. Moscow challenges the world, but without further ado, I will pass the mic to my colleague Andra to introduce to our main speaker tonight, Nicolae Ratiu. Andra, please.
Thank you very much. For those of you who don't know Nicolae, he was born in Switzerland in 1948. He is the younger son of Ion Rațiu. Ion Rațiu himself was a leading diaspora Romanian activist. He had lived in exile for 50 years. He returned in Romania in 1990. He stood for president in the first round of elections. And then he continued to serve as an MP for the next 20 years. He also represented Romania in NATO negotiations. Nicolae came for the first time to Romania with his father in 1990 and helped set up the independent daily newspaper Cotidianul, the Daily. He co-founded the charity Relief Fund from Romania, which still fundraises through charity shops in the UK and is supporting the FSC, Fundația pentru Sprijin Comunitar, which is based in Bacău. Together with his brother Andrei and Șerban Cantacuzino, Nicolae co-founded the Pro Patrimonio, Romanian National Heritage Trust, in 2020. And they are looking to restore and return historic Romanian buildings to the community. And I understand you have an event coming up on the 22nd of January at the Romanian Cultural Institute in London. And that is a concert to celebrate the 25th anniversary. Nicolae also chairs the Rațiu Family Charitable Foundation, which since 1996 has awarded over 2,000 scholarships to Romanian students studying in the UK and to civic projects. The total value of these grants is over £4 million. Nicolae has published his father's diaries between the diaries that were kept by his father between 1940 and 2000. The years 1978 to 1989 are still being edited, I understand. And Nicolae has also run the family business supporting these activities, whose investments are mainly in the real estate business. We are here tonight to talk to Nicolae about Moscow Challenges the World, which is a recent republication of his father's book, originally written between 1947 and 1950, published in English in 1985 and published in Romanian in 1990 and in 1991. I hope I got all of those right. And over to you, Nicolae, for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. The only thing that was wrong was my father didn't carry on in politics in Romania for 20 years. Unfortunately, he only lived another 10. So he died in 2000, so he arrived in 90, but he had 10 years of unexpected, his dream coming true, that he was able to go back to Romania after 50 years in exile, to stand for Parliament and to found a daily newspaper. Those were his principal goals, and to introduce Romania to democracy and hopefully teach Romanians something about democracy, which in 1990 was quite a tall order. And I think we're still working on teaching democracy or learning about democracy in Romania. Democracy unfortunately, is never perfect. It's always there for perfection. The book that I'm going to talk about this evening the name is Moscow Challenges the World, or Moscova Provoaca Lumea, the Romanian title. There was an article in The Economist recently about the increasing chaos and instability generated by Russia within European liberal democracies. Via propaganda, support of minority extremist political parties, this is exactly what Russia always does. This is also what Rațiu writes about in Moscow Challenges the World. As you may know, Moscow Challenges the World was in fact written between 1947 and 1950, when for most of that period of his life, Rațiu was lying flat on his back in a Swiss sanatorium suffering from tuberculosis. This prevented him returning to Romania to fight the post-war election in 1947, as he had intended, and to repeat, if like, the long line of politicians in the PNC, the National Peasant Party, of his family, of our family. It also, being in Switzerland, caused my mother to give birth to me in Switzerland in 1948 rather than in Romania. And given what fate my father would have experienced, along with all his university contemporaries, people such as Corneliu Coposu, Gabriel Țepelia, and numerous others, 17 years of imprisonment, I consider he and his exiled family rather lucky. He certainly did not consider himself lucky, other than still being alive. He obviously wanted to go back to Romania, but having tuberculosis, it was impossible. In his frustration, he used his time confined to the sanatorium to continue his research and to write. His research was a follow-on from the studies he had done in Cambridge in the years 1941 to 45, where he studied politics and economics under Professor Robinson, who was an ardent Marxist, which served him in good stead because he studied it deeply, understood it totally, to reject it completely. The written result in this book, presented and retranslated today, is a carefully worded, extremely informative, deeply thought through and detailed history and analysis of both Russia and of communism, with IR's conclusion of how the two combined would inevitably produce an ongoing and deadly threat to the rest of the world. He explains, citing Russia's history back to Ivan the Terrible, that Russia, whether it be under Tsarist, communist, or any autocratic rule, is imbued and always will be imbued with the same messianic, expansionist, imperialist nature, inspiring her to pursue world domination. With communism discredited, that ambition has been forced to be curtailed. However, that has not stopped President Putin in his aim to restore as much of the Russian Empire as he can. Russians believe themselves to be a superior race, to be the sole holders of the truth, to be indeed the third Rome, a nation surrounded by enemies requiring subjugation and control. We, Stejere Lelaru, who is the publisher of this book and wrote the foreword, one of the forewords, to whom I'm most grateful, and I both felt that the content of Moscow Challenges the World to be irresistibly pertinent to what Western democracies face today, with the same Russia led by Putin and his entourage. Just how serious is that threat comes through in the strongest possible terms in the pages of this book, as then much of the world today do not take the Russian threat seriously. Maybe they're learning rather better in recent days. At the time of writing in the immediate post-war years, Ion Rațiu's recommended definitive answer to Moscow's provocation was military confrontation by the remaining allies in order to avoid immediate further expansion beyond the Baltics and Central and Eastern Europe. Today, if Ukraine falls, all of these countries will again be under threat, with or without NATO. Ion Rațiu writes, and I quote, "Russia consistently opposed the formation of any defensive alliances or grouping of states of which she was not a member herself, on the grounds that they were directed against her. If any such organization already existed, she did her utmost to destroy them." Another quote, "Wherever there is a revolutionary situation, Russia's moral and, if available, material support is forthcoming. Waging border warfare, justifying the invasion of a neighboring country to restore the rights of their Russian nationals living there, deprived of their rights." Now remember, this was written in the late 1940s, immediately after the Second World War. "The Russians throughout their history have displayed," this is again a quote, "the Russians throughout their history have displayed an insatiable land hunger. Once a piece of territory ruled by them had been lost, they never rested until they recovered it, even though the territory in question often happened to be of trifling importance. Such was the case with Armenia and with Bessarabia." He has some interesting and perceptive comments on the Russian people. Again, a quote, "She, Russia, has great advantages over Western democracies because her selfish policy can be pursued without let or hindrance. She can pursue a selfish policy because the leaders of Russia are completely free from considerations of morality. Not so the Western democracies. The Christian morality, to which all pay lip service, imposes the rule that every act should stand scrutiny on its own merits. A bad action, even if the desired ultimate end which it serves be good, remains bad." Or, another quote, "It is often said that Russians have no sense of humor. It is very rare to find a Russian who will see the ridiculous in a dramatic situation, who will grasp the comedy within every tragedy. As for his ability to see the absurd and to laugh at his own most earnest and dearest endeavors, there is little, if any, sign of it." I might add that Karajali certainly was not a Russian. My father's own view, as a Romanian, or maybe his British influence, I don't know, when he lived there, on this subject is written in his diaries. And it comes from a notice he saw in a bookshop propped up against a book. "A sense of humor is one of the most precious gifts. It is the oil to the wheels of life. There is little hope for the man who is gloomy and cannot see the funny side in the little irritating events of everyday life." Ion Rațiu's conclusion on the magnitude of the challenge of Moscow was, "The Russians are, they believe, the master race. Every non-Russian is considered an enemy, or at least a potential enemy. Russians possess the truth. Their appeasement is not possible." The only answer for the West, as he saw it, was to show military strength, which was the reason no one would publish his book in 1950. Everybody at that time, after the war, was tired of war. They didn't want to go to war again. They wanted to avoid it, find an alternative solution. At the same time, to reveal to the world the awful truth about life in Soviet Russia was also a necessity. Meantime, in Europe, the Marshall Plan, what Winston Churchill called the most unsordid act of history, formed the basis for the post-war reconstruction of Europe, with it generating the economic stability to support the development of democratic, capitalist free nations and a concrete, successful answer to the Russian communist alternative. From a military perspective, the North Atlantic Council met for the first time in 1949 to restore and maintain the security of the North Atlantic area. The founding of NATO, which celebrated its 75th anniversary in July last year, I think it was no coincidence that during the 90s, Ion Rațiu ended up as Romania's representative at the North Atlantic Council, NATO's parliamentary body, and lobbied passionately and successfully for Romania's membership. He being convinced that membership would be the key to Romania never turning back east to Moscow. He was right, as he was in what he predicted in Moscow Challenges the World. Now, with recent events in Romanian electoral activities and the problems that we've been seeing, that danger, it seems to me and to many others, is rearing its ugly head again, as going back to the east, which would be a disaster for Romania and would be a disaster for Europe. Please, that is the end of my talk on the book. If you can find the book, read it. It's published by Omnium, Editura Omnium. If you look it up on the internet, you can buy it. But it is a fascinating book, and the explanation of Russia and Russia's history and how it is in detail and a fascinating read. I highly recommend it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was really insightful and very interesting to hear the journey. I suppose that there is a slight question that remains, which is what is it that motivated the reprint? I mean, I have a version that was printed back in the, I don't know if it's visible, back in the day.
Yes.
It's signed by Ion Ratiu as well. And I can see it was handed out on the 23rd of January 1990 in London. So what are the differences between this version and the new version, and how
the new version is this? You probably can't see it in the light.
Yeah.
Can you? Yes. This is the new translation into Romanian. There's no difference in the text. The only difference is the foreword, which is a foreword written by me, putting, if you like, the book into context, in today's context, and a foreword also by Professor Denis Deletant, which is more about Romania today and Ion Rațiu and his writings. So that's the only difference. But in fact, you see, it was first published in 86 in London, which was coincidental with Perestroika, and as such, publisher became interested in it again and published it. And then when we went back to Romania in 1990. Bringing the English book, the one that you held up, it was very quickly translated and was actually and it wasn't a particularly good translation because it was done sort of in about 3 weeks or so, and then it was quickly published in March 1990, about 100,000 copies, and it was sold out almost instantly. There was such a hunger in Romania at that time for any book that criticized communism and criticized the communist past of Romania and opened people's eyes to what had been going on around them, as well as to themselves, from viewed objectively.
Thank you very much. I was stricken by the coincidence or not coincidence of the fact that the first publication was in 86, which was 35 years since its writing, and then publication is 35 years after the Romanian Revolution. So
yes.
It's an interesting coincidence.
Yeah. Well, it was we republished it because of what is going on, with the war in Ukraine, and it's as in the book. Don't be surprised. This is what happens. This is what Russians do. It doesn't matter. As I said, it doesn't matter whether it's under a communist regime or an autocratic regime, even a czarist regime. Historically, this has been repeated over and over again.
Just going back briefly to go forwards, you already covered the reasons why the book, even though it was completed in 1950, wasn't published in England until 1986. But I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a bit more on how it was received at that time. In UK, you've just mentioned the reception in Romania in 1990, that people were desperate for this kind of this type of book. But I'm just wondering how it was received in the UK in the 80s.
Yes, it's extremely well. It was. I remember going to the launch, which is at the House of Commons, and a lot of MPs and members of the House of Lords came to it to attend it, and a lot of journalists. It was extremely well reviewed, and it was it told them what they were kind of hungry to hear, because during the post-war, there were a lot of apologists for the Soviet Union in very, very many countries in Europe, and right through into the 80s. And even though the Cold War was raging, and we'd been through nuclear threats and so on, there was still people needed their eyes opening and understanding more why it was happening. Why was the Soviet Union so aggressive, so belligerent, so determined to foment unrest and undo sabotage Western democracies, and which goes on today even more than ever. Another question.
Thank you very much. Staying on the legacy of the book and its relevance today, what are any specific messages or takeaways that you would like readers to have or to consider, especially sorry, I'll start again. Are there any specific takeaways or messages you would like readers to consider, especially given the current context that you've already referenced? Thank you.
I think the message is, which I think I explained as best as I could in the book, is needs to be understood and needs to be recognized in today's world. Russia is not a benign, friendly, neighboring state. It is determined to destroy the Western economies, Western democracies, and they're doing their best to do so with all of these populist parties who they support financially, who they support through social media, through these bots. You've probably heard about it. Prigozhin is gone now, but Prigozhin set up there's a huge building in Moscow, which is just its entire purpose is running these kind of campaigns through social media, And they've been doing it for a long, long time. They didn't just start with the first Trump presidency doing this. They're doing it, they're doing it, they continue doing it, and people need to be aware of it, aware of what's going on, and the severe danger of the Russian influence on the countries. Like the latest one to be problematic is the election just now in Austria, where the populist Putin-supporting leader is now forming a coalition with one of the other conservative parties in Austria. Slovakia, the Russians interfered in that election. And I don't know if listeners, viewers remember the detail, that it was a video that was a fake video that was put widely through television of the democratic, like the central sort of rather than an extreme populist party candidate about him, and a complete fake, but it was swallowed, and this guy Fico won. You saw just the other day, Fico went to Moscow to beg for oil and gas, because the Ukrainians stopped the gas being allowed to pump through the Russian gas to pump through Ukraine, and he the quid pro quo, is that he's very much Putin's man in the heart of Europe. What happened in Romania? I mean, the Russian interference, I think, is pretty obvious. And he talks, Georgescu talks very openly about his sympathy for Putin, his desire to get out of NATO, out of Europe, and be, stop the war at whatever, just stop supporting Ukraine in any respect, and that brings Romania back into would bring Romania back into the Russian orbit. I think people, and the other thing is, my wife is Ukrainian. She lived in the Soviet, brought up in the Soviet Union, went to university in the Soviet Union, and finally got out in '87. And you should speak to people who lived under that society, which Putin is recreating in Russia. It's a country with no freedom to speak, to write, you have to just you keep quiet, you stay out of it, and that is the kind of society which is people who are thinking that Georgescu is an answer to Romania's problems. That's what you're going to end up with, a society like you have in Russia. Can't think of anything worse. So that's the message. Take seriously Russian desire, as described in this book, to undermine every other society. Everybody else is an enemy.
I suppose just a continued reflection on that thread then, about truth's battle against fake news and misinformation, and specifically considering the final part of the book, just prior to the epilogue, which concludes with Ratiu's statement of his belief in the necessity of a vigorous spiritual revival in the West, but until then, the only really effective weapon, he says, against communism is objective truth. And I suppose just, continued reflection on that in relation to recent presidential elections and Russian interference. How do we operate in this kind of battle with truth against?
Well, it's it's the truth about what the society in Russia really is, as I tried to sort of put across, probably badly, because it's a nightmarish kind of society that nobody would choose to live in. Do you see people emigrating to Russia? It's not the kind of world that people who've grown up in Western democracies would welcome, one bit. Where he said, as you well pointed out, that was his conclusion, is that the West is kind of sleepwalking, has been sleepwalking, and not confronting this reality and acting, if you like, positively to explain the benefits of democracy, and why democracy is so important and why it has to be protected. We all take it for granted, and especially younger generations who can't imagine a life other than what they're used to in the West. Being free to travel, to do whatever they want to do, to talk, to play music, to do all kinds of different freedoms that we take for granted, which in those kind of societies, the closed societies, China, Russia, that doesn't exist. And the West, I think what he was saying is that the West should be more proactive to try and to explain itself better than it does. I think that's the message, and to get that somehow across to people. As I said, because democracy is very largely taken for granted.
Thank you. I think I'm passing on to Andrew Martinescu next to have the question.
Thank you so much. Good evening again. It's extremely insightful. I can't believe we're living again through this anguish that your father lived to and battle almost his entire life. We analyzed, it was a civic effort. We analyzed thousands of narratives during the campaign, making the connection with Russia and bringing it into the public domain for the first time back in November, December.
Yes. Wonderful job, I would say. Well done.
Thank you. It wasn't easy. And we've noticed how the Georgescu campaign appropriated your father's image and
Yes.
attempted something that's also very Russian in nature and modus operandi.
Yes.
Appropriated your father's image and engaged in historical revisionism yet again. That is my first anguish. My second one is the ambivalence.
Can I just say, while I remember that point, because when both Simeon and earlier on, like a year earlier, and Georgescu used the phrase, my father's phrase, "I shall fight to the last drop of my blood to defend your right to disagree with me," they both quoted that as something that they believed in, but they believed it as in to say, to justify, or to justify why whatever rubbish they would say, whatever racist, whatever misogynistic, whatever blasphemous, no, not blasphemous, they pretend to believe in God, not any it justified, but by what he said, that they could say anything. As in other words, I have a right to express my opinion, whatever it is. So anyway, okay, go on.
Outright manipulation. And the second one, I'm just rather worried, that I'm just gonna say it straight up, about institutional ambivalence towards Russia in Romania at the moment.
Yeah.
Can be done.
Well, we mean what could be done? What can be done about it? Was that a question? Don't.
Yes.
Well, now you know why I never went into politics. Because it's difficult. What can be done? I think that what we have a program in our in the foundation, the Rațiu Foundation, in what we call the Rațiu Forum, which is the teaching of difficult history, where we have workshops with young history teachers in Romania to train them, teach them how to tackle difficult histories in Romania, which include, like how Romania acted during the Holocaust, which is not a pretty story. How the Romania has dealt with Roma issues going back in history. Again, not a pretty story. How communism came to power and actually and operated, and what it did to the people. That is not in the curriculum. And I think these are things that need to be changed. And there's a dearth of decent, up-to-date, new, objective history books in the schools. So it's there's a failure in that. And I think only through education, really, you're going to ultimately change the institutions, because the institutions will end up reflecting, what's being taught in the schools, and so on. But other than that, it's which is unusual for Romanians. It's I don't know, wanting to be polite about people, about a different sort of society and different values or lack of values. I think that that's part of the problem as well. Romania is not alone in that. I mean, many Western countries, European countries, they close their eyes. Oh, we don't want to hear about that nasty stuff. No, let's just get on with our nice, peaceful living off the fat of the land life, and not worry about what these people might be doing over there. And an example of that, when you talk about institutionalized, I mean what this issue with that you guys exposed through your research is the total lack of preparedness of the Romanian state to defend itself against cyber warfare. They just they were found to be completely asleep at the wheel, as they say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is, that there was no sense of preparedness for that kind of level of?
It's just not what I think. It's just not being ready to face reality, and rather just sort of brush it aside and get on with our own lives, rather than taking the what was going on seriously, because they were totally caught napping. And but I don't even know if today whether they learnt the lesson. In Romania, is supposed to have very, very smart and very widespread all sorts of different secret services, and the Americans are supposed to be rather impressed by Romanian information services and so on. But where were they with this? I don't believe that they were in any way siding with with Russia. I don't believe that, because that could be a reason, could be excused, but I don't believe it. So, as I said, I think it's just sitting on their hands, not wanting to face, not being prepared to face reality. I don't know. Disappointing.
I wondered if we might discuss a quotation from the epilogue in which Ratiu says that communism thrives on confusion. Just wondered if you wanted to elaborate on that.
Yes, well, that's why they are bent on destabilizing and confusing other countries in their neighborhood, in Europe, democratic countries, because if they're confused and they're as I said, destabilized, and the thing is and you can see in so many of countries now what chaos is reigning, and I would argue that largely stimulated by Russian influence. I mean, is not totally proven, but I believe that the Brexit campaign was partially funded and supported by Russia. They wanted to see Europe disintegrate, and that was a good way of doing it. That's a good way of starting the process, and they support other populist movements in other different countries, and very often you see that when the populist people come into parliaments and into European Parliament and so on, they behave to create chaos in those institutions, in those different parliamentary institutions. That's their game. In Romania, you had this Stoșiacă, this woman who was appearing in the European Parliament, wearing a muzzle and so on, and it seemed ridiculous. But and then she was actually stopped from running in the Romanian presidential election. But it's this is all to feed chaos, to make chaos. If you have chaos, then you divide everybody. Then you can infiltrate. You can get in. You can take power. You can take over. And I'm not feeling very optimistic about the future, quite frankly.
Another reflection from me. Wondering if we could explore another of Ratiu's pronouncements in the book. He says, what is needed if Western civilization is to survive is that we should live our religion with more vigor, by which he means, and of which he writes, I think, incredibly poetically, the religion of love, which has sown the seed of individual worth in the humblest soul, which carefully examines every individual action or deed on its own merits, regardless of the objectives pursued.
That's lovely. I'm glad to see you've read it carefully, and well done. No, that's beautiful. He was a very human being, and believed one of the things he said when he was explaining communism. Explaining the difference, if you like, between communism and democracy when he first arrived in Romania, and talking to people was the whole point that in a democracy, it revolves around the individual, and what is the rights of the individual, not the rights of the government and the rights of the system. It's the government is there to protect the rights of the individual citizens, and that is part of the love of mankind, if you like, and of mankind love within mankind for each other, and that means the respect for other people and the respect for other people's opinions. If you deal with hate all the time and oppression, that's it. Love goes out the window in terms of a society, and that is the big difference. And No, I mean he put his finger on it in so many ways. It's a very good book to read. It warms the soul.
Thank you.
Thank you for reading it.
Talking about what you were describing there, it brought to mind a quote that says, "Those who do not know their past are bound to repeat it." And reading the book, my first thought was, how might we actually bring the book into reality? How can we bring the lessons from the book into the classrooms in Romania? But not just in Romania, because if we're talking populism and Russian influence, we're talking France and Germany, we're talking the UK and other countries as well. Have you considered any of this? Are there any initiatives that you are considering moving past the book?
So you think it's that good?
I think it's that good, yes.
Well, I've hesitated to take it further, and republishing it in the UK, because it's I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I just not sure that there's an audience for it now. You think there is an audience for it?
I would say so, yes, absolutely. I mean, I've done some of my studies back in France in a very communist-leaning university.
Yes.
Extremely socialist universities in the UK. There's a rise of the leftist party who for some reason or other thinks that communism is the thing to do. I really honestly believe that at least in a university debate, but even college-wise, it would have its place, at least.
Well, maybe I should rethink it. But what I would need to do is to find a good publisher in Romania to take it on again and republish. Sorry, in the UK, and perhaps in other countries. It's his other book, which we haven't republished, is called Policy for the West, and he wrote that in 57. Is it 57 or 67? I'm sorry, I don't remember this. I think it might have been 67.
It was 57. Sorry, because you
definitely, yeah.
It was 57.
Overlapped with one of my upcoming questions, but I'll come back to that later.
Okay. Because that was like his writing the answer to Moscow challenges the world, which is the challenge, and the answer in his answer in that book, Moscow challenges the world, we've touched on a bit as we've been talking, but in Policy for the West, he goes into it. He goes into it even further, and there particularly, I confess I haven't read it again recently, as recently as Moscow challenges the world. I should, but there he's very good and goes into like flashpoints in the world that will happen. In other words, he predicted, Suez crisis. He predicted war in Vietnam. He predicted what was the other one? Afghanistan. And that these are all flashpoints where the communists would go for sort of a soft option, an opportunity to get in and stir up confusion, which was one of the quotes I gave you about how that's a standard Russian sort of it's in their genes to stir up a revolutionary, obviously a communist revolutionary, wherever there's an opportunity. I mean, during the 60s and 70s, they were all over African countries. I mean, I remember that well, and there were, interestingly, a lot of the champions of their communist communist movements in Africa, like in the Congo and in Algeria, in Ethiopia, in I don't remember all the different countries, but over and over again. And most of the leaders, of course, went to Moscow universities, and remembered as heroes of communism and during the communist history, which I dare say Putin will be busy reviving, as he gets, considers himself more and more powerful. Hopefully he doesn't.
I mean, part of what you're describing is essentially a divide and conquer approach, which has always been at the heart of whatever Russia has done. But to come back to, do I think that the lessons and the book is that good? Definitely, because in the run-up to the publication of the analysis that Andra led, we had a series of focus groups with a number of people from the Romanian communities in the UK and other places as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the information that came through about the misinformation and the kind of complete twisted understanding of history and understanding of the political scene, and essentially confusing right with wrong and day with night. Everything is completely turned on its head. So we really believe that this has a place today in the educational system as an actual educational tool more than anything else, because it spells out so well what misinformation is and how the approach works, how confusion is sown.
Yeah, and that's it. It's extraordinary because it's so present, describing what's happening, what is happening today, what has been happening for so long. But a lot of us are more conscious of what's happening now. But then the vast majority are not conscious. As you say, or they're completely misinformed and have a completely different understanding or interpretation of history. Well, I'll take your encouragement on board and see what I can do with it.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Staying on the topic of how useful this book remains today, beyond reading it and beyond its immediate sort of educational informative value, do you feel that some of the themes that are discussed in the book would lend themselves to research, to more in-depth research? And if so, are there any particular fields that you think would be well served by revisiting your father's book?
I confess I haven't thought about it in that way before, but I feel sure that there are. You should pick out different messages, if you like, that come out in the book, and could be valuable, and interesting idea, especially in sort of political science courses and social sciences. I don't have an answer to say to you. Yes, it should be this A, B, C, D, because there's too many in there really. It needs to be thought about. And I guess I need to reread the book as well.
You already touched on this a little earlier, but I wondered if you could just tell us a bit, for those who haven't come across Ratiu's other two books, how this one compares with Policy for the West, which, as we said, was published in 1957, and Contemporary Romania, which was published in 1975.
Policy for the West was published and in 57, and was extremely well received and extremely well reviewed in 57, and was and it actually sold very well too, and Contemporary Romania which was done in 94, I think, is it? Do you know, Nika? Is it 94?
75.
What?
1975.
Oh, sorry, no, I'm going crazy. No, it's 70, yes, 74, not 94, 74, 75. Yeah, because I remember when he did it, he finished it he went off and sat under a palm tree in Guadeloupe and finished it.
Oh,
with all his notes and so on. And of course that the Romanian regime and the Securitate tried their utmost to prevent its publication, even to actually approaching the printers' union to get them to refuse to print the book, because there are quite a few communists in the print unions back then in the 70s. And they tried desperately to stop it, because the last thing they wanted was for anybody to know what was really going on in Romania. It's a book full of facts more than sort of theory as in Romania today, and it was successfully published and received, and was translated into, if I remember rightly, French and Polish. I don't think it was ever translated into Romanian. But being as I said, it's more like a lot of economic facts about the country, what was going on, rather than any kind of theory and political theory. I mean, there is, yes, of course, it can't not do it, but I think there's less, if you like, attraction perhaps for such a book to be republished. But Policy for the West could well, like you're encouraging me to do Moscow Challenges of the World. Policy for the West also, probably, I need to reread it again, because, as I said, I haven't read it again recently. So, all right. So, are we coming to the end?
Yes, we just have a couple more questions, if that's okay.
Okay.
Just two short ones.
Yeah, please, because I do need to be somewhere fairly rapidly.
Right. In that case, if I may, I will consolidate the last two questions into one, and then we'll do the closing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Which brings immense joy to my heart, because that means I'm back on track and ask the traditional question I always get to ask at the end of every live interview. So the two questions are: what else are you working on at the moment, in terms of your father's legacy, or in terms of any further books? And secondly, carteadevineri is a book recommendation club, and the project has been running. We're in year 5, Sorina. Yeah, we've just hit our 5th anniversary, and it started as an idea for people to share book recommendations about Romania. What would you recommend us to read on the carteadevineri book club? Thank you. So what are you working on, and what should we be doing next?
Okay, what we're working on now is the republishing, sorry, not the republishing, the publishing of my father's diaries from 78 through to 89. There's probably 3 more books in that period, because he wrote more and more, as in the less he got involved in business, and wrote more and more. That is and then I would like to, but it's a big job. That's what I'm doing it with Cesare Lalaru, the historian, because the very interesting part about those about the diaries are the footnotes, because he researches all the people that my father meets, and particularly the Romanians, obviously, and it's very interesting to see the two sides in those diaries. That's from the ones we published 5 so far, from 1940 through to 78. You see the Securitate version, because he has access to the Cineas's files, as in people reporting, somebody in my father's entourage reporting on what was going on, and the Securitate's version of what was said or happened, as on my father's version, my father just writing his diary. So it's fascinating, sort of juxtaposition of stories and fact. The other thing that I want to do, but that's going to be a big process, because the first diaries we published were through the 90s. And there were 7 volumes of the 90s, and but those were done without footnotes, and I'd like to republish them with footnotes and explaining who all the characters are, because it's starting basically in 1990 when my father went back to Romania, so it spans those 10 years, and they're fascinating diaries. They've been quite well because we published them ourselves. And they've been quite well read, but with footnotes, I think they would be even more interesting to a new generation's reading now, and getting a complete, as in day by day of how Romania evolved from the end of, quote unquote, end of communism in let's say Christmas '89, to the end of the '90s, and what was going on behind the scenes, particularly in the Democratic Convention parties, and what was happening in international politics and how they affected Romania and so on and so forth. And it's a contemporary, very objective diary of what happened, and as I said, those I think will be particularly well received if republished. Now, I suppose therefore I should recommend you when I get those done, you should read them. I'm sorry, that's a facetious answer, but who did I think of? Does it have to be a Romanian book?
It has to be a book about Romania, but it can be written by anybody else in the whole wide world.
I can think of a few other very interesting books right now, like
You've given us a good answer there.
like the Bob Woodward book, which is called War, which came out recently, and the Anne Applebaum book, which is coming out now, historian. I highly recommend those. Her as an author. She's the one who wrote the book about the Ukrainian famine in the 30s in detail, and she's an interesting woman. She's married to she's American, but she's married to the Polish foreign minister, what's he called, Sikorski, today, and actually lives in Poland. Okay. So there we are. That's the best I can do.
Thank you very much. It's always interesting to put authors and people who come on our sessions on the spot and see what they come up with.
This
Some
is
have
the one.
actually,
This is the one to read.
absolutely, absolutely. Some have actually taken the question away, and they've come back with additional answers afterwards. So if you want to do that, by all means, the door is always open. But
Yes.
coming up to the end of today's session, thank you very much for your time. We wanted to give a shout out to the Pro Patrimonio event that is set up on the 22nd of January at 6 p.m. as part of the Pro Patrimonio 25th anniversary. It's taking place at the Romanian Cultural Institute on Belgrave Square in London. And it's a Romanian festival with a live concert with Alexandru Tomescu and Dragoș Ilie, and a talk by Jeremy Musson, The Role of Beauty in Cultural Heritage and Conservation Reception with Romanian Food and Wine. And I believe there's a Depth anniversary exhibition with a private view on British painters in Transylvania. So if you guys want to join that, we absolutely encourage you to do so.
If you can't, I was going to say, if you can't get into the Pro Patrimonio concert, which is I know is close to being full, the evening before on the 21st is for Adept, which is another foundation I'm on the board of, and is that's all about protecting biodiversity and in Romania, and high nature value pasture and traditional farming methods. But they have this exhibition, and that is a free. It isn't a concert. There's a talk, but there's an exhibition of paintings by, I think there's 12 British painters who've painted lots of scenes in Transylvania, and they're all on the walls, and you can buy them, and they're very beautiful, some of them.
Thank you very much. Fabulous.
Right. So
Otherwise,
thank you for having me, as I say. So
you're more than welcome. Otherwise, we'll see you guys on the next episode of carteadevineri, which is with Anca Pârvulescu and Manuela Batcă, talking about creolizing the modern. In February, we're still confirming the date. It's likely to be 21st of February. But yeah, thank you very much and have a lovely weekend, and see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicolae. That was fascinating. Thank you.
thank you. Enjoyed it. Bye-bye.
Good evening.
Bye.
Bye.